Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Tell you a little bit about myself and Hackenburg apiaries and how we got where we are and where we shouldn't be or whatever. But I was born in Pennsylvania and born and raised in a dairy farm. And one thing I didn't like was milking cows. And I told my dad from the beginning, I'm not going to be a farmer, I'm not milking cows. Well, my dad got hurt in a farming accident and I was about 12 years old, and that basically changed the idea of milking cows, because the farm had to go and some other things. And I was in the FFA and I started keeping bees as a VOAG project, and by the time I got to high school I had several hundred hives of bees. And everybody I knew in them days, it was anybody came back and forth to Florida in the wintertime. I mean, if you seen a truck going up and down the road, well, it was one of your buddies or somebody else. So we started coming to Florida, and I'm in Dade City. I've been there since, actually I started out in Kissimmee before Disney came to town, when a steak was $1.98 at Johnny's Restaurant. The day that Disney decided to come to town, steak went to $2.98. But that's a long time ago. Anyhow, over the years, I've been involved in national beekeeping politics quite a bit. I've served as president of the National American Beekeeping Federation. I helped start the National Honey Board, the promotion board. I served on that board for 12 years. When bees started falling apart and so on, as he mentioned, you know, I'm the guy that blew the whistle and said there was a problem. I served as chairman and still serve as chairman of the National Honey Bee Advisory Board. That's a board that both national bee organizations, excuse me, the American Honey Producers and American Beekeeping Federation have formed to basically try and deal with the EPA and chemical companies and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of voting power, a lot of power to go do things on our own, and so several years ago, a number of us from both groups started a group called the Pollinator Stewardship Council. We're a 501c3 group. I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but we are basically at our board meeting in Chicago about a month ago. We have voted to take the charge to basically get neonics off the market. I'll talk a little bit, hopefully more about that toward the end, but just to tell you about the neonic situation a little bit. Neonics were supposed to be reviewed by the EPA this past year in 2018. The chemical companies begged, borrowed, and stole and got 2 more years out of them. So we are going to lead the industry to lead a lot of other groups, which we already have a lot of groups on board, that we're going to try and get this stuff off the market. There's science, new science every week, every 2 weeks coming out across the world, and all the science points in the same direction. Which leads me into what I'm going to talk about mainly tonight, and that is, if somebody wants to hit the next slide, feed bees, pollen, substitutes, and other additives, and why. Got a little story to tell you here, kind of goes with this. This lady had a duck, and the duck died. And she took the duck to the veterinarian, and she said, I think there's something wrong with my duck, but, you know, he said, well, your duck's dead. And, well, I don't know about that. So she wanted a second opinion. He brings in the cat. The cat crawled up the table and looked at the cat, looked at the duck, shook its head. Well, that don't make sense. She said, I want another opinion. So he brings in the dog, and the dog sniffs around. Yep, the duck's dead. So he goes over to the computer and he types away there and he gives her a bill for $300. And she said, $300 to tell you my duck is dead? He said, well, I'd probably did it for $25, but since she wanted the CAT scan and the lab report, he said $300. So that's the way of this bee business. We need a CAT scan and a lab report. Keeping bees used to be easy. How many people in this room kept bees 20 years ago? How many people kept bees 30 or 40 years ago?
How about 60?
Joe, you ain't 2 people in here that old, are you and me? I started coming to Florida in 1966, 1967, somewhere back in there. We used to bring bees down here in the wintertime, unload trucks, come back in January, early February, throw boxes on them, and take the honey off. Throw a little terramycin at them. When I say take the honey off, I mean take the honey off. We make 100, 150 pound orange honey. We load them bees up, take them someplace, maybe up to Gallberry, make another 100, 150 pound of honey. Haul them up to the northeast, make another 100, 150 pound of honey. The biggest problem we have is finding time to fish and hunt. There wasn't any time to fish and hunt because the bees kept making honey. It was easy. So what's changed? There's a lot of things have changed. And it didn't all happen in the last 15 years, but it became onto us gradually. And for any of you folks that have dealt around the chemical industry or dealt with chemicals in your life, what you'll realize if you think about this, every 10 to 15 years, 10 to 12 years, 15 years, the chemistry and technology of pesticides, whether it be pesticides, insecticides, rodicides, or whatever, has changed. And the reason for that is, I didn't always know this stuff, but I've got a big education in the last 12 years. The reason for all this is the fact that their patents run out. And so when their patents run out, the other companies can make this stuff and they can make as much profit as the others. So they have to make new products to keep. And that's why in the early 2000s, late 90s, and the early 2000s, neonics came on the market because the old hard organic chemicals, patents had ran out. And it wasn't those chemicals weren't working. They were working fine. But they needed something to make money. Those old chemicals work a lot better than the new chemicals, and in reality, there's a lot less contamination because of the fact that these new chemicals, even though they tell you there's no contamination, if you go back and you read their registration papers, cafeidin, the largest used neonic in the world, the half-life is 19 years, 7,300 and some days. That's right in their it's right in their registration. But when they present this stuff to EPA, they give EPA about 10 sheets and then this whole big pack of papers. And if you read the summary says it lasts a short time in the soil. Well, I guess that depends who's living a short time in the soil. The sad part about neonics is there's no water, supposedly no water in the United States that can be tested now that doesn't have neonics. If you want to take your water and have it tested, you probably can't take it anywhere and have it tested for neonics because of the fact that most of the companies that test for water won't do it anymore because of the fact of the liability issue. They don't want to be involved in a lawsuit. We have the Pollinator Stewardship Council and the National Bee Advisory Board was involved, some other groups trying to get water samples out of the Sioux River and out of some other rivers in the Midwest tested, and it just can't happen. You probably have all heard about the laboratory in North Carolina that's run by the USDA that basically is supposed to look at all our food and tell us what's wrong or not wrong with our food. The gentleman that runs that lab, I know him really very well. If you send, at one point, most of the universities were sending samples to them to have them tested. And all of a sudden, these samples we started to get to the point that we knew we had samples that were bad, but they were coming back that they weren't. So we spiked some samples and we did some other things, and I'm saying I'm talking about universities and some other folks. Come to find out that the USDA instructed this laboratory, you crank down your parameters of what you're looking for. So if you go from up here down to here, that means you can't find it. So if you call your congressman up, and you can do this, you can call your congressman and ask him, so what are they finding, how much of some chemical are they finding in oranges or whatever? And your congressman's going to call up there, and the answer will be at levels that we don't, it may be there, but at levels we can't detect. Well, it's there, but it's been cranked down so we can't find it. So we got all these things that have showed up. On to the next one. Of course, you guys, get out in the country, you see the sprayers, spray in the middle of the day. Go on, next one. Suburbia. I don't have to tell you about Suburbia. This is Suburbia. I coming down 95 today, I asked myself, what am I doing here? I'm a country boy. Even though I own a bunch of trucks, I'm still a country boy. You people realize that the 6th largest crop grown in the United States that makes absolutely no profit whatsoever is irrigated, takes 3 trillion gallons of water to irrigate it, takes 200,000 gallons of gasoline to cut it, and it uses 70 million pounds of chemicals. That's the U.S. government's own numbers. And them numbers, that's the lawns. Tip the next slide. And of course, you've always all seen this, don't enter. You know, it's kind of interesting about the lawn business. Years ago, lawns started in England, and the only people could have a lawn was the king or the upper class people, because that's the only people could afford it. The slaves that worked for them, they had to plant vegetables and stuff in their front, so they got food to eat. Now things have changed, you know. Now somebody goes down the road and says, well, that guy must be a really prosperous guy. Look at that lawn he's got. We are now slaves to our lawn. We ain't slaves to the king anymore. We're slaves to our lawn. And it's gotten so bad that you live in a have a homeowner association, or even some local governments, that they mandate that you got to do this. 70 million pounds of chemicals are used on lawns. There's only 180 million pounds of chemicals used in all the agricultural crops in the United States. Stop and think about that. When you bring in shrubbery and all the other stuff that we actually, there's more chemicals used by suburbanites, or whatever you want to call it, not by the applicators and by the home people and everything else, than is used by all of agriculture. The interesting thing about suburbia is that the homeowner, a lot of them, you know, we don't look at the labels, or if we do read a label, we go down to Walmart, down to Home Depot, and we buy a chemical, and it's for your roses. And you get it, and you look at it, and it says this is for 1,000 square feet. So the lady comes home, well, man comes home, whichever, and he's got this little rose garden about this big. He said 1,000 square feet. They must have made a mistake. That can't be for 1,000. That's 1,000 square feet. That's a lot. So he takes this can and he just sprinkles it out. Fine and dandy, but guess what? It rains. And that's where all that stuff comes from. It's in all our water supply. Flip the next one. Beekeepers, we're not exempt either. I know, we're out there. This slide's not in the right place, but anyhow, we'll talk about it. But this slide's supposed. By the way, I'm computer illiterate. My niece, who works for us 1,000 miles away, helped me put these slides together last night at midnight. Well, not quite midnight, 10 o'clock.
She's not a vegetarian.
No, she's not, and I'm not a vegetarian. But anyhow, back up to the one before. You know, we're as beekeepers are in the same boat. We're putting chemicals in our hives. You know, when I first started keeping bees, and for the first 20, 30 years I kept bees, that was a no-no. But now we got mites, and go two more. Problems in our hives. The mites showed up, you know, and so we put in all kinds of chemicals to take care of the mites. The next one, get the next one. The beetles showed up, and we're putting things like flippernel in there and stuff like that. And this is all nasty stuff. And unfortunately, all this nasty stuff that we're using and all this nasty stuff that the farmers are using out here all synergizes and causes things that nobody has any idea what is going on. On top of that, the farmer puts 4 or 5 different chemicals in a tank mix, and nobody still knows what's going on. And then we blend all this stuff together because our bees are going out there and bringing this stuff back. So we have all kind of synergism. One little quick note for you guys I know there's some of you probably in this room going to send some bees to California. If you're using Amitraz, don't put Amitraz in your hive if you got a box that's going to get wet, because Amitraz, this is free information. It ain't going to cost you nothing. Amitraz gets wet, it becomes very deadly to bees. I mean, it kills mites, but it gets wet. So just a word of caution. Last year, somebody here in this part of the world had a load of bees had to be washed because of the ants or whatever in California, and it really did a number. I mean, several of them, but that one. Back to the steak part. So bees need good food. Whether you eat steak or whatever you eat, bees need good food. And a lot of the things, the way we run bees today, you know, this is not a real big bee yard, but that was a picture that, I mean, that yard sometimes might have that's our shop yard, and it might have 400 or 500 hives of bees sitting in it. That was not natural. It never was natural. I mean, to have 400 or 500 hives of bees. Next picture. And of course, we get ready to go to California. The good Lord never proposed that we have bees ready for February to produce anything, but the almond tree didn't know that, and the almond tree blooms in February in the middle of the dead of the winter. So, all these beekeepers now, I started sending bees to California in 1992. We got a whole $50 a hive back in them days. The trucking cost us $25. But anyhow, we're doing all kinds of things to our bees. It's not really natural. Next picture. So this is the kind of beehives that whether you're sending bees to California or you're getting bees ready to produce honey or whatever you're doing, this is what you want that beehive to look like. Sometime from now to March, April, or whatever, depending if you're producing orange honey or whatever you're doing. I got a slide that got missed. I'm going to read something to you. If I can get this up. Turning around here. This light work? Nope. Okay, here we go.
Oh, you need a light?
No, I'm fine. This was done by the University of Oregon. And you can find this online at Oregon Extension. Can your apiary location or your pocketbook support the following? 12 weeks is the usual length of time to produce a colony for for pollination, honey production, or packages or queen rearing. The amount of food required to produce one frame of worker brood is the amount it takes one frame of honey, one frame of pollen, and one frame of water for every frame of brood you see there. During that 12-week period, one colony is going to use 120 pounds of honey, 72 pounds of pollen, and 90 pounds of water. Now, that figures out to about $250 a hive if you're going to pay for all that. In a year's time, the rest of the year, to maintain that hive, that colony is going to need an extra probably 75 to 80 pounds of pollen and another 150 pounds of honey to keep this colony growing. Well, I just got done telling you about all the issues that have changed out here in the last 20 years. Next picture. In 2006, when the bees all were falling apart really bad, I laid awake a lot of nights. I thought I was having a heart attack, literally. And my old country doctor in Pennsylvania said, "You ain't having a heart attack, you're just all stressed out." Well, he's a good old boy. He's a couple of years older than I am. He tells all kinds of funny stories about I was one of his first patients, and some of the stuff I don't believe he tells that happened, but he says it did. But I talked to him about a lot of things, and basically, and I have files stored away in Pennsylvania in a garage of stuff that was on the internet in 2006 and 2007 that you can't find anymore about how these neonics work. A month from now, February the 5th, 2007, I got a phone call. I was in Lake Wales, Florida, working bees with my son. And I got a phone call from a gentleman at EPA, Tom Steger. He's in charge of something. I forget what his title is. Like my mind's going blank. Getting old. Spent 3 hours in a day talking. I didn't know that man, never met that man before in my life. I spent 3 hours sitting on a beehive talking to him. Tom has told me numerous times, is David, if you wouldn't have told me the things you told me that day, sitting there when you were talking to me, we would have never had another conversation. But he said, the things you told me, the only way you knew what you knew was because you seen it inside of a beehive. Because that stuff was never published. What the effects and how this affects bees, queens, drones, so on and so forth. Some of the stuff that they had published was on there, and basically what these chemicals do is they break down immune systems. And having a talk with my good old friendly doctor, John and I one day, I said to John, so I told him, it's almost like AIDS. I said, when you stop and look at what's going on, it's almost like AIDS. And I said, so what do you do with patients that have AIDS? And he said, you give them lots of protein. AIDS isn't going to kill anybody. It's all the other viruses and stuff that's going to get you. Well, guess what? That's exactly what's going on with your beehive. It's not the neonics that are actually killing you. It's the sublethal effects because of all the viruses and all the other stuff we've picked up. The scientists now say we're up to 19 or 21 different viruses that they're finding inside the beehive. They were probably always around, but the fact is the bees have become more susceptible to these things in the last number of years, and so the bees need something. And as I explained to you earlier, it's what's out there in the field isn't safe. I mean, the bees bring this stuff in. You folks down here are living in paradise, really, in the bee world, because you have something coming in all year long. Take your bees up north. You only have to go to North Florida. You don't have to go any further than that. And by the time fall rolls around and the first cold days set in, the bees aren't getting any fresh food. And when they stop getting fresh food, they have to go back and take that food. They're raising brood. They got young to take care of. So they got to get that old pollen that's stored away, make bee bread out of it, and feed it to their young. And when they start doing that, that stuff's contaminated. It's like you canning your vegetables and putting them in the closet, and next winter you start feeding your family, and everybody starts getting sick. Well, that's exactly what's going on. So what you need to do, and you need to be feeding these bees protein to something to supplement them. Now we make our own protein, and you can go to our website, and I'm not exactly sure. It's just terrible. But I think it's HackenburgApiaries.org or HackenburgApiaries.net or something. I don't even know what it is anymore. But anyhow, there's several different recipes. We have a protein recipe on there. We have next picture. We have a recipe for sugar patties and essential oil patties. And Dave Mendy spoke to you people a couple of months ago, and Dave and I have a saying. You know, Dave and I go back a long time. I remember the first time I met Dave, he was nothing but him and his brother, nothing but a bunch of kids. I met him in South Carolina at a truck stop. We were all hauling bees north. You gotta ask the bees what they want. You know, it's like feeding your kids. You know, you can feed your kids something. If they don't eat it, it don't matter how good it is, they ain't gonna take it. You know, so you gotta make these bees something they want. The bee supply people are making, there's all kinds of protein patties out there, and some of them are good, some of them aren't worth much. My way of looking at it, and I've done this numerous times, I mean, I've been in research projects with all the major bee supply companies. We got less of them today than we had a month ago. We lost 2 bee supply companies, and if you guys don't know this, Brushy Mountain is no longer with us, and Kelly is no longer around. Kelly, Man Lake bought them all up. Brushy Mountain had some financial issues, and they went out of business in mid-December, and Kelly sold out to Man Lake, and so anyhow, that was free information too. But they sell, when you go to the catalog or go to your bee supply deal, there's all kinds of different patties out there. Take some of them home. What works in your backyard may not work for the guy down the road. But one of the things that really bothered me and still bothers me, a lot of your protein patties, especially your cheap protein patties, have got a lot of soy in it. Now, my background is farming. I own 2 farms. I still own 2 farms, and I don't farm them, but my best friend farms a couple thousand acres. Soy is just a filler in reality. It's got protein, but it's not, it's something with a lot of kick in it. And my other concern was that with soy is the fact that as these neonics come on the market, most of the soybeans, 80-some% of the soybeans of 80 million acres, were seed coated with neonics. And we know that it's going from the corn plant into the corn and into the pollen. So, my concern was that. So I laid awake a lot of nights thinking about things. Back up one more. And as a young guy, I raised a lot of veal calves. And one of the things I learned through a good veterinarian friend of mine was that eggs is something that is really high in protein. Eggs have got a lot of properties that we just don't even think about. They've got healing properties and some other things in there that are natural that we just don't usually hear about. But I wake a lot of nights thinking about this, and actually Marla Spivak, who is the only, they gave her some award for being the genius scientist or something like that. I tell Marla, she's up at the University of Minnesota, I tell Marla she's the only genius I know. She's got a piece of paper that says that. But Marla sent me a bunch of work that was done by a fellow by the name of Haddock back in the early 50s in Minnesota, University of Minnesota. And the interesting thing about it was that he used eggs to make protein for bees. Well, in the early 50s, nobody cared about protein for bees. You didn't need protein for bees. My friend Brett 80, who's the largest beekeeper in the world with 90,000 hives of bees, I joke with him. Tim and I was just on the phone out here about 2 hours ago, joking about something. And I tell him, you're not a beekeeper, you're just a people manager. But now I just lost my train of thought. I'm good at that. Oh, anyhow, 15 years ago, if we would talk about feeding all this protein to bees, people stand there and laugh at you. What are you doing this for? Because it was probably a need for it, but not the need we got today because of all the contamination. But anyhow, anyway, went through a lot of different formulas, and this is the one that we've come up with and used for years. Mega Bee, which is a really good product. In fact, we're feeding a bunch of Mega Bee this winter because of a deal we got. But the guy that made Mega Bee, Gordy Rodell, if he could have put eggs in there and put them into a solution for him, because the bee industry asked him to develop a product that we could put into a liquid. Well, you can't put eggs in suspensions. And so if you read the label on Mega Bee, if you buy a bag of it, you can mix it up and make a liquid out of it. Don't try it because it still don't work. But anyhow, it works, but it clogs up, it clogs the feeders up. So what I'm saying is, there are a lot of good products out here, but your bees need something more than they're getting from the environment, because what they're getting from the environment isn't as good as it used to be. That's just fact of life. Go ahead. The sugar patty here, we basically use that when we're going on a long pollination run or need to feed some bees sugar, put a patty of sugar in there. It's got some protein in it. Some brewer's yeast mixed in with it to hold it together. Most of you people know Bob Harvey. He's just up the road here a little piece. Bob and I worked together for quite a few years in California. Him and I still work together in Maine pollinating blueberries. But first year Bob came out there, I guess, or we worked together or whatever. And you'll see a picture. Go ahead here. This is what the stuff looked. Anyhow, Bob said to me, he said, our bees had 15 pounds of protein underneath the lid and plus a 5-pound sugar patty. And Bob said to me, what are they going to do with that? I said, well, I hope they're going to eat it. And I said, I hope they're going to make bees out of it. So anyhow, we came back from California and home for a couple weeks, and then we're back out to California. And Bob got out there about 3 or 4 days ahead of me, and he called me on the phone. He says, hey, what? He said, I pulled the covers up in some of your beehives. I said, yeah, what? He said, that stuff ain't there. I said, what's there? A lot of bees. I said, that's what's supposed to be. We're making bees. But anyhow, if you people might be interested in making your own protein, this is nothing more than a big mortar mixer. And up the page there, this thing runs about 300 pounds a batch. We dump it into an auger. We took an old cow and auger and revamped it and put bigger motors on it and made a timing device that basically I can meter out how much I want in the bag. Flip the page here. Built this thing which basically takes that patty of stuff and smashes it down. Go ahead. And so we can make patties anywhere from 2 to 5 pounds and put them in these. This is a gasoline bag. You can go on Uline and find them. They're about this big. They're for putting big cookies in, I guess. We call these cookies. A friend of mine that owns a big arrestor, that's what he calls them. He said they're bee cookies. And so we throw this on top of the beehive. You're going to need a rim. All our hives, this is back in the beginning, we didn't have rims. We just had rims and throw our covers down. But now our covers actually are covered. The rim's part of the cover. And but your bees also need carbohydrates. I mean, and here you're kind of fortunate. You got some feed coming in, but the days there's not feed coming in, they still need, if they're running low on feed, and if you want to build bees, you got to keep supplying food. Talked to somebody here earlier today, or somewhere along my way. I stopped up the road and picked up a bunch of beeswax and talked to several guys up there. I don't know, somebody, we were talking about this. You got to move. If your beehive is plugged up right now, you got to get that honey out of there and give them queens room and give them something, food, to keep that food coming in so they think there's something going on. And if you want to make bees, what we're really doing is trying to make bees do things, like I said earlier, that wasn't natural. Years ago when I first started keeping bees in Florida in the early 60s, mid-60s, you didn't worry about this because all we were worried about is making a crop of orange honey. And oranges, if they bloom when they're supposed to bloom, they bloom in March, mid-late March. And the bees were ready. They had their time, they got ready. Over the years, I've been involved in a lot of things, and when the sugar companies, people out here, there's things go on that we don't understand. But a number of years ago, the government, USDA, made a ruling that all food had to have a date on it. And sugar was one of them things that had to have a date on it. Well, the sugar companies were notorious for running sugar way ahead of time. Publix and Food Lion and whoever, what was the other big outfit that went broke down here? I can't remember. Huh? Winn-Dixie too, but who was the other outfit?
Albertsons.
Yeah, I guess Albertson. But anyhow, long story short, I get a phone call. I actually go to a warehouse in Lakeland one night to pick up 10 or 15 skids of sugar, and the guy says to me in the warehouse, do you have any use for outdated sugar? And I said, outdated sugar? I said, I didn't know sugar could get outdated. He goes, well, I don't know anything about it. And he said, you call U.S. Sugar tomorrow and you talk to this lady. Well, I called her and she gave me some other guy, and this guy came through the phone at me. There is no, we don't have outdated sugar, and I don't know who told you we had outdated sugar, and blah, 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 blah. I said, sir, look, if you ever decide you have outdated sugar, keep my phone number handy. About a year later, the phone rang one night, afternoon, late. This lady calls me up. She said, I got your number on my desk here. She said, something about outdated sugar. She said, could you use some outdated sugar? I said, yeah, but I said, how many loads of outdated sugar? Now, I was in that warehouse, and I seen 25, 30 loads of sugar sitting in there that they had red tags sticking on. And I said, what do you got, 25 loads? She said, right now I got 113 loads to get rid of. I said, don't go anywhere. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. Jerry Latner, who runs the data facility in in Florida. Jerry and I go back to the beginning. I mean, we're same age within a few days. And I told Jerry this story. Jerry said, well, don't ever let it get away. So I called Jerry. I said, you get your boss on the phone. You get get Nick Dayton on the phone. We're going to make a deal here. So we made a deal. And I got what I want. But there was a lot of 4-pound bags, and I guess it was Albert's. I don't know who it was. I mean, it was pallets and pallets, and Winn-Dixie had 2-pound bags. I mean, you couldn't even give them things away. But anyhow, we took a bandsaw and made a thing, flipped the page. We made a thing you could empty a pallet in a half an hour. You could go through a pallet of 4-pound bags. Flip the page. And we have a big tank over here. You can see 2 pictures there. And it don't matter whether you're mixing syrup on a big scale or you got a little tank. Turn your air compressor on, run your air down. That thing there's got, all that is a piece of pipe with air going through it. And that basically stirs the sugar, and it ought to be warm, but go ahead, flip the page. You want to get it nice and bubbling, and you can make your own sugar syrup, unless you're buying it on a tanker load, but just... And there's all kinds of ways to feed bees. Dave Mendes probably told you about the feed stations outside. We've tried that. We've done all them things. Our deal is we move bees a lot. You know, back in my younger days, we pollinated as many as 4 and 5 crops a year with the same bees. So a lot of times the bees needed fed, and so we put a feeder in them, and we got a big tank on the truck and 150 feet of hose and this nozzle, and the guy just walks around and squirts it in the feeder. Flip the page. We've all seen plastic and feeders, and some of them have ladders in and all kind of things. Well, we go back long before all that, and so we had all these old feeders, and bees would drown in them, so we made a press to press metal, and that's a just 1/4-inch wire mesh that we bent that goes down in the feeders. Flip the page. And here we're feeding some more. Next picture. So what's changed? You know, we've lost our bee pasture, and, you know, look around us. You know, I remember the days when I literally kept bees in this part of the country back in the late 60s, early 70s in the fall on Brazilian pepper. And guess what? These houses weren't here. And all these shopping centers weren't here. And rural landscapes changed. You know, our farming practices have all changed. You know, it's just bee health. We have more pathogens, more viruses. We got the mites. We got pesticides. And so we got to do something to help the bees. And phase 2, more of the same's coming, unfortunately. We, as I said earlier, part of the member of the board of the Pollinator Stewardship Council, and you can go online and look up who we are and what we're doing. But we are probably the driving force, the only driving force of the bee industry. Unfortunately, a lot of beekeepers, you know, got bees sitting on somebody else's property, and they just, I don't want to talk to them about this. I just want, you know, I don't want to get involved. And I guess if that's the way you are, well, that's fine. But it gets to a point that you got to do what you think is right. And I get days, literally get days, when I think, why am I doing this? And I had one of them here about Thanksgiving time, and my brother-in-law was a minister, and he's about my age, but we sat down after Thanksgiving dinner, and I said to Dan, I said, you know, I don't know why I keep doing this. And he said, I'll tell you why you keep doing this. You're doing it because it's right, and you're doing it because nobody else is stepping up there to the plate. I've testified in front of Congress many, many times. I've testified in front of the EPA and was told by the chemical companies, or chemical companies told EPA that I wasn't representing the industry. Well, I got a letter from both national organizations. That's what I was there for, because I was representing them. But if somebody don't stand up to these people, unfortunately, they're taken over. They are taken over. And it has to come from the grassroots folks is where it's got to come from. And maybe you don't want to, you know, open your voice. You can sign petitions and do all kinds of things. But, you know, we need money, you know, as any organization, the Pollinator Stewardship Council, we don't have a big budget or anything like that, but we have people on staff and we are making a difference. People are standing up, listening to us. We have coming to the American Beekeeping Federation next week. We have the gentleman that's head of registration for EPA. We're going to sit down and have a heart-to-heart talk with him. There are some good folks at EPA, but unfortunately there's some folks at EPA that are on the circuit between the chemical companies and EPA. And you know, we as taxpayers think that if you read the fifth of the law, the Federal Insect and Rodent Act, you would think that there shouldn't be any problem. And I was naive enough in 2006 or 2007 to think that, you know, all we got to do is go talk to EPA about these things and they'll fix it. Well, guess what? They make promises. I sat on a committee at EPA. There was 40 people on this committee, an advisory board. And the interesting thing about this advisory board, we looked around the table, there was somebody from the Center for Disease Control, there was school people, school district people represented. But when you divided it up, it was basically a 50-50 split. You had the chemical people, industry, they were there in droves, you know, but they were all people that were appointed by EPA to be on this board. You're a beekeeper, and a lot of this revolves around labeling on pesticides, how these pesticides are labeled. And one of the biggest things about this whole thing is, are bees actively foraging or foraging? Now wait a minute, I'm a beekeeper. They're either foraging or they're actively foraging. What difference does it make, you know? We spent almost 2 years, literally 2 years, and guess what? Nothing has ever happened. Because we take a vote and you couldn't get a clear consensus. I mean, that's how, you know, we laugh about it, but this is how ridiculous the whole situation is. And it don't, you know, it's with all of it up there. Thanks for the invitation. I'd be glad to answer any questions. A lot of things I probably didn't cover, but, you know, if you got any questions, I'd be glad to answer some of them.
Thank you, Dave.
What do you think about dry pollen or dry feed?
Dry feed works when it works. I mean, if you got pollen coming in from outside, lots of times bees aren't gonna take that dry pollen. You go to California. Bob Harvey's a great at feeding bees in California dry pollen. He believes in that, and it works great out there until the first pollen starts coming in off the almond trees, and then you can just pick up them feeders and haul them all back in and they'll take down lots of dry food. Here in Florida, you know, this part of Florida, I don't know, you got a lot of pollen coming in the wintertime. I mean, and so, you know, I'm not sure how good it worked. Man in the red shirt up here.
So you're feeding Vanny and sugar syrup with the same.
That's right. You need to be stimulating them bees. You basically got to be stimulating bees. That's what it's all about. And you're giving them, you know, we fed a lot of sugar even pre all these before the pollen patties. But now you need to give them something. Oh, the other thing I skipped on is probiotics. You know, you see all these different advertisements for probiotics, and we're feeding probiotics. I mean, we are. I mean, you have to talk to my son. He's now the beekeeper. I just do what I'm told. But anyhow, and we do a lot of experimenting. We really do, because everybody comes to us and here, you know, try this. We're trying a lot of things. But probiotics, I can tell you, you need to take some and try it to know what, you know, take some hives over here and some hives over here, you know. and get your buddy to come over and put 5 or 10 hives, some of this, some. Don't tell him what it is, and let him look at those bees, 3 weeks later and see which. That's the way to figure out, That way your mind's not saying, well, I think that's a better product. When that guy looks at it, or get a couple of them to look at it. Somebody else have a question here? Yeah.
It's going to sound like a naive question.
That's all right.
But neonics, is that a chemical? I mean, that's in the...
Neonicotinoids. Neonicotinoids are artificial nicotine. And you know how nicotine works. Nicotine, if you chew it, if you rub it on your skin or whatever, it goes in your blood system. So what they do is they're seed coating seed. Well, this is kind of interesting too. You'll love this because you guys aren't involved in the seed business down here. Seed coating is not a pesticide.
Okay.
The largest use of clethodim, the biggest use of clethodim won't show up in the pesticide maps because the chemical companies figured out a way. It's seed coating. It's not a pesticide. We're just putting the coating on the seed. Yeah. So when you start looking at pesticide maps, it's not there. They can put it in the trench when they plant watermelons down here. Well, first of all, they soak the watermelon seed in the stuff, and then they put it in the trench in a granular form. And then when the plant gets 3 leaves, they spray it again. If you want to pollinate pumpkins, it's a great place to kill bees. But that's exactly what it does. And the chemistry keep changing. I said to you before, they're mixing this stuff. They're mixing all kinds. They're mixing fungicides with neonics. They're doing all kinds of, one trip, they call it one trip over. Somebody was talking to me earlier tonight. We're not sending any bees to California. My son says we're done. We're going to make splits. We can make as much money making nukes as we can send bees to California. I have to put up with them people out in California. I mean, because you got to get into there. California is a land unto themselves. I mean, they got an ag station that they find one ant on your truck and you don't have an ant sheet, you go get it washed. You've got 5 ants, you got an ant sheet, you still go get it washed. Unless you're like myself, we know how to we can get into California without going through their bug station. But but anyhow, I've sent lots of loads into California, but except one night I had somebody didn't speak English. 2 guys didn't speak English. My son loaded these guys. I'm out in California. This is kind of an interesting story. I'm out in California. Sunday night, the phone rings. Some lady on the phone. She goes, "Oh, this is Officer So-and-so at the Needles Ag Station." "Yeah? We got one of your trucks sitting down here, and we don't know what's going on." I said, "Well, what's going on?" "Well, he is on the eastbound side leaving California." I said, "He's what?" They didn't speak no English either. My son was all upset. These guys didn't speak English. The broker, you couldn't talk to the broker. You couldn't get him on the phone. Anyhow, she said, "Well, I don't know. I don't know what language they speak." We tried to converse with them, but they're going east. Well, the deal is that we got to Kingman, Arizona. We got off Interstate 40, went up US 62, cut over in Nevada, grabbed 95, ran 95 down to Old Highway 66. And when you get across the railroad track, you turn right on Old Highway 66. If you go east on Old Highway 66, you come right out at the ag station at Needles, California. Well, these guys, I guess, didn't know right from left, And but anyhow, long story short, she says, "I don't know what to do with them." I said, "Well, turn them around, send them, Well, they don't seem to have any paperwork." I said, "Well, I can't help that." And so I said, "Well, look," she said, "I can't do anything." But the whole deal is nobody will take responsibility, too. Government. Well, I can't make no decision here. Somebody else has to make the decision. That guy won't be in the morning, or she won't be in the morning, or whatever. I said, "Okay, well, here's the deal." I said, "You got water on that side of the road, and they got a water hose. Turn the water on." I said, "Explain to them how to hook the water up." So the next morning, I had a phone call from the lady in charge, daytime lady in charge. She seemed pretty nice. She says, "Mr. Hackenburg," she says, "I don't know what to do with this truck." I says, "Well, the last I heard out of him, he was headed towards L.A. mean, that was my story, because he was headed toward L.A. When he left Florida, he was headed toward L.A. Anyhow, she said, well, if I can figure out how to tell them to get turned around, she says, I'll get them headed your way. She said, I hope they find you. They did. But anyhow, you got to be good following the directions. If you make the right instead of the left, make the left, you don't get there. But back to California. So about 3 years ago, we started having issues in Southern California. You get bees back that just wouldn't build up. And California's always been a great place to go in the wintertime because almond pollination really makes bees grow. I mean, you can't ask for anything that makes bees grow. You don't want to eat the honey. The honey it's the worst tasting honey you've ever tasted in your life. I mean, bar none. Bob Harvey made the mistake first year he was out there. He extracted 40, 50 barrels of it. He tried to sell it to somebody, and he got it all back. And they wouldn't even use it in bakery honey. But, so, 2 years ago, the situation got a lot worse. We had bees that came back, and my son gets kind of radical. I mean, I guess it comes from his mother's side. But anyhow, I say that in front of her too. But anyhow, he said, I can't put up with this. I don't know what's going on, but you got to find out what's going on. What are these people doing out there? What are they doing? Well, I called the grower up. He don't know nothing because the grower don't know nothing. He hires somebody else to tell somebody else to tell somebody else to tell somebody else what to do, So here I am all summer long, 2 summers ago, crying in my tea and my soup because these bees won't grow. I mean, they won't get off of 6 frames. Feeding them, they won't even store sugar syrup. Went to the state meeting. We had a state meeting that year in Gainesville. And I knew I wasn't the only guy in that orchard. There was 6,000 hives of bees in that orchard. I only had 2 semi-loads in that orchard. I had 800 some hives of bees in there. But we had a technical council meeting on Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon, whatever afternoon it was. And when the gavel ended, bang, there was 4 other beekeepers standing in front of the table. I was sitting out, and they said, "What's going on?" I said, "What do you mean what's going on?" "Well, why won't these bees grow?" I said, "I've been trying to find out what you guys' problems are all summer." But nobody would talk because beekeepers, you don't want to feel like you're doing something wrong. And guess what? You aren't doing anything wrong. It's not your fault. This isn't anything you can control. Somebody else has controlled your destiny. That was on the front page of the USA Today magazine a number of years ago. They quoted me right on the front page. I can't control my destiny anymore because somebody else out here is doing something on their land, and it may not even be the land I'm on. It's probably over there on a neighbor someplace. But anyhow, I get on the phone and I call a couple applicators in Delano. Nobody will talk to me. I finally found a PCA, a crop consultant, that said, "If you keep my name out of this thing, I'll talk to you." I said, "I ain't bringing anybody's name into this. All I'm trying to find out is what changed in chemical application in the last year and a half, 2, 3 years." He said, "Well, we're using a lot of growth regulators. They call them IGRs, insect growth regulators." Well, stop and think about it. Insect growth regulators stop growth of larva growth in insects. Guess what? Honeybee's an insect. Duh. So, and I've had this discussion with these people, nicely. So he says, the other thing that we started doing, he said, the suppliers, is the way he put it, the suppliers are pushing organic silicons. I had no idea what organic silicons even was. Then I said to him, well, he said, what I know about it is it's a spreader. And then he said, somehow it makes the plant take it up. So I did a little bit of research, made a few phone calls to a couple scientists. And what it does is that it basically, organic silicon's sand, it spreads when it goes on the plant, and it basically abrasives that organic silicon somehow rubs the tissue of the plant so that the plant uptakes the growth regulator. And our bees gathering the pollen and nectar out of that, bringing it back, feeding on it. Bees came back last year. I mean, somebody told me tonight, pollen was all covered over with, propolis. The bees wouldn't eat that stuff. Well, no, they're not going to eat that stuff. They're not going to try not to eat that stuff. This year, right now, is probably the worst bee loss that's ever been in this country. There's outfits in the Midwest that ran 20 and 30,000 hives that don't even have 1,000 hives left on the ground. A friend of mine that's on the board with me in the Pollinator Stewardship Council, he had 3,200 hives of bees last fall. He's got less than 200 alive. And the almond growers mainly don't know much about yet, because beekeepers are the last people to let. I was talking to a guy today about this out there, and he said, well, I had lunch with an almond grower yesterday, and he said he's kind of concerned because his beekeeper won't answer the phone. Mr. Harvey told me today that he's had more and more calls in the last couple of days. Somebody needs 3,000 more, and somebody needs this many more, and somebody needs. The word from the beekeepers in the West is, well, Florida will bail us out. Well, let me tell you something. There's a lot of good bees down here in Florida, don't get me wrong, but there's guys down here, commercial beekeepers down here, that, when they call you up on the phone and they start asking you questions, and I get all kinds of phone calls because I know a lot of people. I had to get a new phone the other day. I'd rather take a beat than get a new phone. So the guy's putting the phone numbers in there, and he says, do you know how many phone numbers in this phone? I said, I have no idea. He said, there's 1,500 and some numbers in this phone. I said, I don't know 1,500 people. But anyhow, you get these guys calling you on the phone, and well, we had this cold snap that went through here, right after Thanksgiving and sometime there. The guy on a Friday afternoon called me up, just up the road here a little ways, called me on the phone. He says, called me about something else. At least that's what he said he called me about. And he said, we're out feeding bees. He said, these things have shrunk. He said, some of them have lost 2 frames. He said, since last week. I said, you had a cold snap, didn't you? He goes, yeah. I said, so when it warmed back up, the bees went out flying, and unfortunately, they don't know we're home. And they just don't. That's why you see all this shrinkage when you get these cold days, and you'll have bees that are, have this big box of bees, and all of a sudden they go like that, and they come back again, and then they go, next cold snap comes. Fortunately, you guys are kind of fortunate down here because you don't see them big cold snaps we get up Dade City and, Callaway and North Florida and Georgia. Fellow worked for me, young guy worked for me, went out on his own a couple years ago. He's getting married on the 16th of February. He was by the house the other day and brought his wedding invitation and all that good stuff and introduced his girlfriend. She's from Dade City. And calls me up yesterday, and I could tell by when I answered the phone. Laverne's in. 2 days or 3 days before that, he was standing there in the house, and I said, "How's the bees look?" "Oh, they look good at Thanksgiving." Haven't seen them since Thanksgiving. They're up in Georgia. He called me up, and he says, "What's going on?" He says, "I gave you the whole outfit this morning." I says, "That ain't a good way to start a marriage." But it's just the way it is, and unfortunately, it's going to continue. There's new trends out here. There's farmers that are seeing daylight. There's farmers that are getting off this treadmill. But I'm more worried about the suburbiaites, because that treadmill is, just like I said, it's a prestige thing. I got a greener lawn than you do.
So this isn't cold snap.
But
Why are the bees not finding their way back after a cold snap?
because it's affecting their memory. One of the signs, if you go, and I don't know if you can find this study anymore, but Florida State did a study back in the late 90s on sub-Mediterranean termites, using this stuff on sub-Mediterranean termites. Whether you want to, think about it, but bees and sub-Mediterranean termites are all colonized insects, okay? What they found was that they wouldn't groom themselves, they couldn't feed themselves properly, and then they couldn't find their way back home.
From the neonicotinoids.
from the neonicotine. That came right out of the university.
It's not the cold snap, it's the neonic.
It's, well, the neonicotinoid, yeah, but then they don't start, what happens is they start consuming this stuff. When the cold snap comes, the bees set in the hive and they couldn't fly for a day or two, or didn't fly for a day or two. So now they're eating that food that they stored all last summer. And so those bees, those field bees, nurse bees that are making bee bread out of that stuff, they're getting that in their system. Oh. And so it's hard to explain, but that's what, you know.
It's a good idea to take that stuff out, you know, if you see.
Oh, that pollen, like we're talking about here, that encapsulated stuff. Dennis Van Engelsdorf, who's now at University of Maryland, but spent a lot of time in Penn State and a lot of time traveling around the country with me, but over the years. But the pesticide levels in that encapsulated pollen are 1,000, anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times higher than the pollen right next to it that ain't encapsulated.
Mr. Hackenburg, the problem, I see it a little bit of a different view. Usually, in the times of year when the bees don't rear so much brood, it's a little bit. And they, when it's a cold snap, it's a cold snap. But when they have a lot of open brood, because we are trying to push them,
Right.
and then next day, it's a cold morning, they go out because they need water, they need maybe some fresh. What makes the bees to go fly a lot? The open brood.
Well, that is too, but the thing is, the other,
If they go out in a cold weather, in a cold day, a lot of them perish.
But what-
Simply because it was the same in old country in Russia where I lived. Usually, when the cherries bloom and everything, by this time it's already a lot of open brood. Then all of a sudden we would have a very cold spell with cold and snow like this. You go outside, Todia, this day.
you come out in the north, we have, I can't show it, I can show it to you, but in my phone here, I have a picture of bees that was taken in a 400 colony bee yard 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Nicest looking beehives you want to see. It got cold. Well, we had 7 degrees, 30 degrees, this is in Pennsylvania. I mean, it was just a yo-yo, and it rained and miserable. My son loaded these bees the day after Thanksgiving, 400 and so. I'm on 2 10-wheelers because, I mean, that's what he put them on instead of a semi. And wind was blowing, I don't think it was more than 30 degrees, and the wind was howling. And when they got back to the shop, I said, "Did you crack any covers?" He said, "No, I didn't crack no covers, it's too cold." They left in the wee hours of the morning, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning I'm getting ready to go to the church and the donut shop, and 8 o'clock the phone rang. And he stuttered, and he said, "You better sit down." I thought somebody got ran over, there was an accident or something. He said, "There's nothing in these bee boxes." 3 weeks. They went from 8, 9 single story boxes full of bees. The picture I have on my phone, I can show it to you if you want to see it. Lots of bees up in that cover, and I can show you the box. I asked the guy today, I said, what do you see different? He said, "There's burr comb, there's everything right there, and there's honey, there's everything, but there's no bees in the box." They go.
So why you think they go? The nicotinoids?
Because they have to go back and get that, they're using the food. They're still raising brood. They're still brooding that hive. Open brood, but they have to use food that they had got last summer that's contaminated.
Well,
Why didn't that bother them last summer?
Because they have so much food coming in. You're bringing fresh food in all the time. But there's something, of course, scientists will tell you, when you let that stuff sit, just like we're talking about this encapsulated brood, for some reason it starts, well, it's just like you inject poison into something, and, you people, most of you never been around, dairy farming, but you make silage, and you go out and you cut hay and you put it in there and it ferments, But if there was something bad got in there, I mean, I've seen this time and time again where something bad, you know, whether it's a dead cat, you know, that got in the sow filler and got in the. You'll have a big area right around that that's all contaminated, and the cows sure ain't going to eat that stuff. But the bees are, as long as they got fresh food coming in, they're doing okay. It's when they don't get that fresh food, you know. They're forced to eat the other stuff. Yeah.
But if you want the bees in the summertime, how many times did you see that it's no pollen in the hive? Because sometimes when it's a good queen, 2 rainy days they consume it all.
That's right.
They consume it all. So,
But that's, you know, it didn't used to be that way. I mean, there was always pollen dearths. Now, I've kept bees most of my life in places we didn't have to worry about pollen dearths. Our big problem was years ago in the north, we had way too much pollen because they just gathered too much pollen.
usually when it's a lot of pollen, is it not a sign of a failing queen?
It can be, but the problem is when you got areas where they're just, when you're in wooded areas where they're just solid, you know, oaks and maples, and they're getting pollen off of shrubbery that's blooming all summer. I mean, it's not. You go north and it's a little different. I mean, it's more like it was where you probably came from.
I think a lot of problems in those days is the commercializing too much the bees. We are doing to the bees stuff that bees usually didn't do in this time.
Well, you're absolutely right about that.
So we cannot.
But you mix the two of them together. Yeah, I guess like I said, the beekeeper is part of the problem.
Requires income of money, otherwise you out of business. So we need to send bees to California. In order to send the bees to California, we make them raise brood.
That's right.
We make them raise brood, but it's not so much pollen, but it's not so much nectar. So
Well, you come to Pasco County right now, and I can show you sheets and sheets of pollen. Literally, because we have maple. Oh, excuse me. We got maple blooming. We have, I don't know what else blooming. I mean, I just walked out there this morning, and the bees are just, you know. I mean, all you got to do. I mean, you know this. I mean, go from that yard to this yard, and it's a difference in day, you know, of what they're getting.
It's still. They get only so much pollen. They get pollen usually on the frames that are next to the brood. That's it. They will not put one frame farther away.
No.
Never.
But
So,
they keep moving.
and
They
then
keep moving that brood. They keep moving that pollen out as they keep expanding.
They keep expanding, so when they use up this pollen, then they go to another frame with pollen, and this frame becomes a frame of brood.
But she'll tell you right next to you that they're not going to use that stuff that's contaminated.
I never saw it like this.
Well,
Well, last year when our bees came back from California, all of the pollen in the colonies was propylene. Tons of propylene.
This also may be
you go out here. You go out.
The bees shrink, and the bees propylize. Not necessarily it's bad.
Well,
The bees
Joe,
don't
this is a lot different than when. I know what you're talking about, but this is a lot different than when. This is actually encapsulated. I mean, this is what they call encapsulated pollen. Go home, get on the internet, and look up encapsulated pollen and see what it says about it.
Have you had that has anybody ever tested it? I'm wondering, are the bees taking the pollen substitute and encapsulating it? How
No,
do you
because
know?
the difference with pollen substitute is they're only using that as they use it. They're not storing it.
I did read that, okay.
Yep.
Is there a way?
Yeah.
Someone go.
The pendulum swings on everything in society.
Yep.
You go from one extreme to
That's
another.
right.
We're well behind Europe in many ways as far as health of our food, our water supplies, and use of chemicals. Even our cell phone frequencies, the Wi-Fi in our country is outlawed in every country in the world but the U.S. because the Wi-Fi frequency in our phones here is known to cause cancer. But of course, big money backs
That's
everything.
right. That's exactly right.
So my question to you is, how close do you feel that we are to the tipping point because the voluminous information that's available, that Congress will finally wake up, the lobbyists will finally come around, and the pendulum will swing back.
You are believing in miracles.
It happened in Europe.
Well, you got, I've been to Europe. I spoke in France twice. I was spoke in England twice, and I was in Spain. I spoke. You got a whole different bunch of people there.
Yep.
They're living in what we call precautionary, and here, it's okay. I was on 60 Minutes, and the guy that's the producer of 60 Minutes, don't ask me what his name is, I can't remember anymore, don't matter. He calls, I get an email, or he calls me every couple of months, He says, so what's new? Well, there's nothing new, the bees are dying. Well, that's not new news, so we don't care. And so, there was a crash yesterday on 75 that killed some people. By tomorrow morning, you ask people, did you hear about the accident? And they'll just stand there and look at you. What? Because we're short memory span. What happened at 9 o'clock in the morning, at noon, you don't, and I'm bad.
Tell them the bees are going to pay for the wall.
I eat breakfast at a little country restaurant in Dade City. Two hay farmers in there. And this one young kid, he was thrown off. I don't know how you get thrown off of Facebook. I'm not on Facebook. He got thrown off of Facebook 4 times last year because of that wall.
Back to the pollen. As far as getting out of the frames, you just basically gotta scrape it down to the plastic, or is there a way to?
That's the only way we.
Use a barrel for fire.
Yes, Joe is right about that. But I know guys that scrape them, pay people to stand there and scrape them. But Joe's probably right. The best thing to do is throw them in the fire.
Burning plastic.
Well.
How about feed it to the wax moths? Put it in a wax barrel and let the wax moths clean it out.
Well, that works.
I'm not a real beekeeper.
I'm not either.
But I have a question. You're talking about all these pesticides and nicotinides and all that stuff. I'm thinking, what am I eating out of my hive? Because I like the honey, and I'm thinking we sell that honey to my friends, and I'm thinking, am I poisoning them?
Well,
Go to the church.
it's just. You're probably gonna. Okay. There's a honey packer in this country that started testing honey for Roundup. And he's probably turned down, in the last year, 40 semi-loads of honey. I asked this man, he calls me every once in a while and talks to me. And I asked this man, I said to him, so why did you start testing for Roundup? He said, David, I wished I never would have signed that contract. But he said, I signed a contract with a company that wanted me to test for this, and this, and this. And one of the things was Roundup. I got a call probably a month and a half ago one night from 5 beekeepers in Louisiana. They were sitting in a restaurant, and they called me up, and they said, and I already knew they had a problem, but I knew they had this issue, but one of them already called me. He said, what do we do with this stuff? I said, if you let it sit for 2.5 to 3 years, it goes away. It does. It dissipates. And the one guy goes,
Let the honey sit for 2 years?
yeah.
But it will get like that.
And the guy says, well, I don't have 2.5, 3 years because, this is my paycheck. About a month ago, I sat on a conference call one night with some of the highest priced lawyers in the country. I didn't initiate this. I just got invited to be on the phone call. We think you got a problem with the EPA. Now, these are some of the people that took on the tobacco industry. They took on the BP oil spill. And these aren't people that. But what I learned in that phone call was that a number of years ago, I don't know how many number of years ago, the chemical companies went to Food and Drug. There's no tolerance. If you go and Google it, there's no tolerance for Roundup, glyphosate, which is the chemical, in most food. There's no, it's not that there's zero tolerance, there just isn't any tolerance. Now the bee industry, we have talked to Food and Drug about this numerous times, trying to keep it low under the table because you don't, honey's a pure product, and it's not our fault that it's there, because it's not your bee's fault it's there, because somebody else put it there. And there's laws that says that you can't contaminate my stuff here with your farm over there. There's been cases won on that. But anyhow, 5 minutes into this phone call, well, maybe 10 minutes after we got done with some other nitty-gritty, the guy explained to us that there's a difference between zero tolerance and no tolerance. No tolerance means that, oh, it's there. It's not their fault. It's not Monsanto. It isn't Monsanto anyway. I don't know if you know that or not, but Monsanto got bought out by Bayer. And the reason this lawsuit happened in California about several months ago, Monsanto had no money. I mean, at least they claimed they had no money. Well, on Monsanto, I spent too much time at EPA. I learned so many things I didn't really want to learn. But anyhow, Monsanto actually went to the Justice Department and tried to get them to relieve them of all their liabilities so they could sell the company. Fortunately, the Justice Department didn't do it. And Bayer bought it, and so Bayer's got a lot more money than Monsanto ever had. And so that's why these lawyers went to... But that all being said, we start talking about lawyers and lawsuits and so on. There's a case in California right now where a farmer killed a guy's bees. The farmer insurance company wanted to pay the beekeeper. I mean, it was just an honest accident. This is 4 years ago, probably. I don't know. Time flies. CropLife America is a coalition of all the chemical companies. 66 chemical companies belong to CropLife America. CropLife America said, no, you're not paying him. We're going to court, and we're going to beat this thing. That case was supposed to be in court. Jim Fraser, who's retired now from Penn State, but has bee research and all kinds of things up there. Jim's one of the key witnesses. This case has been postponed so many times. Ray just told me that now we're talking about maybe having, depositions in January. But they have so much money that they can wait us out. They know this. And I'll tell you something else. When the National Honeybee Advisory Board was formed, we got a call from Bayer Crop Science. And they wanted to meet with us. They wanted to sit down and talk with us and see what we could work out. This is as honest as I'm standing here. I mean, we met at Davis University for 2 days. Closed doors. They wanted us to sign confidentiality agreements. And we said, no, we're not signing confidentiality agreements or any such thing. And David Fisher, who was the chief toxicologist for Bayer, he's now retired. If you wanted to get him upset, you just watch him get red in the face and then he would get upset. He said, and I don't know how many of you people remember Alor in apples, but Alor was a chemical that they used in apples in 1979 in the 80s, and about put the apple industry out of business in this country. For 5 years, the apple farmers about lost their shirts. And his comment was, we can make you guys look like the apple industry now. When you sit down and listen to these people, their deal is they want to feed the world. That's their thing. We want to feed the world. We got plenty of food to feed the world. The problem is the world ain't got the money to buy our food. It's not, the corn prices are in the toilet. We planted 97 million acres of corn last year. The soybean prices are in the toilet. It's not the fact, that's up from 70, 10 years ago, it was only 70 million acres. I listen, I don't know if you get the Farm Channel down here, but on Sunday afternoons at 4 o'clock, sit there and listen to some of these economists that talk. It's not all this Chinese thing we talk about and all that. There's just overproduction. And, the people, they can't afford to buy our food, not that they don't need it, but, so you don't blame the Chinese for this whole thing, it's just the way it is.